All right. Hello and welcome to the SAC Writing and Publication Podcast. I am Jason Zhang.
And I am Alfred Kwan. Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about the coronavirus.
Yeah, very big deal. Essentially, it has affected every single one of our lives. No one can go out of their houses. And if you choose to do so, you are putting people in harm. So, PSA, don't do that.
Yeah, so let's just talk about the impacts of the coronavirus. I think it's interesting about how it's spread because it showed how far our society progressed since the last major pandemic, the Spanish flu, in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we really have come a long way, especially with technology-wise.
Downsides of that is globalization. Everyone is interconnected.
Exactly. So,
you can travel almost anywhere.
China did a really good job at containing the initial cases. What made coronavirus really spread across the globe was the accessibility and affordability of air travel.
For sure.
Like, a lot of the cases that happened in other countries resulted in people traveling around the world on airplanes.
Well, it first starts with travel, and your first cases are obviously going to be coming from China, first of all. But once more and more people in the country within itself has the virus, you want to start worrying about quarantining everyone within the countries. So it's more of a problem internally than it is closing off the borders at this point, especially for countries that are well into the cycle, I guess you can call it, which we are in currently, and as well as the United States.
What made the virus spread across the world in the first place was the air travel, and I think that shows how interconnected the world is today.
That's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how it compares to the Spanish flu. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, 100 years ago, the Spanish flu was pretty localized. It took a few months for it to spread to other countries because ships took a few months to get places back then.
Mm-hmm.
So, but these days, you could just fly from one part of the globe to the other in 12 hours, and that changes things. That makes it spread much faster, and it's just terrible.
It is. Makes us rethink, is globalization really good? I mean, we know it's generally good for economies, but we should consider
it has its costs.
Pandemics like this.
It has
I saw Greenland hasn't yet been affected by the coronavirus.
Just like the simulations.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I think, so I at this point I would argue that the financial impact of the coronavirus is much apparent, or much more at scale than the actual damage of the coronavirus.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's a fine balance. All the health officials are telling we have to get everyone quarantined, but at some point, does quarantining everyone, people lose their jobs? What kind of damage is that going to do? And I think you have to calculate and factor in that kind of impact into your policies.
Yeah, it's a really hard decision for the politicians to make. It's and businesses as well. It's if we don't quarantine, we risk people actually getting sick and not being able to work. So I think this is a short-term harm to just kind of try to cut off the virus before it spreads further, so that there's no long-term economic damage of workers falling ill.
Yeah, that makes sense. But at some point, you can't just have
but the stock
everyone
market
staying in their houses for 8 months. Yeah, it did. And local economies everywhere just falling apart. Yeah, Trump's
Alfred.
God damn it.
Marshall Ma, guest star in our podcast, joining right now as we speak. Marshall, what do you have to say about the coronavirus? And he left.
We'll edit this part out, pretend nothing happened.
All right. Resuming. Oh, did he come back? All right, do you want to just join the podcast right now?
Yeah, we have a Minecraft server now for the coronavirus. I'm just gonna do a segment on that.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's resume, and then I'll
Financial
introduce Marshall.
Financial.
I'll resume and introduce Marshall. 3,
Okay.
2, 1. Coming up, a guest star to the podcast, Marshall Ma. Welcome. How are you? What are your thoughts?
I think we shall enforce social distancing, and therefore Richard Wu and I have created a Minecraft server for the entire grade 11.
Isn't
More
that
information
lovely?
can be found on the SAC grade 11 Discord we have created yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Don't
Yeah.
mind to edit that part out. Anyway, speaking of the financial and economic impacts of coronavirus, man, it's bad. I
Yeah,
heard
but
that from Amazon that apparently they're running like a donation campaign to fund
Yeah.
workers' sick leaves. But
I
like,
guess this is where philanthropy comes in.
yeah, Jeff
It's
Bezos,
it's
his
really
net worth,
useful.
it's like $100-something billion. And you
But he does
ask for
avoid many
donations.
taxes.
You ask for donations. I don't know. I just find that a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, that is. Well,
And another part about the financial impact is it hurts just-in-time deliveries. Or yeah, so because the first thing that happens when you enforce social distancing is that logistics and infrastructure kind of collapse in on itself because those things require movement of goods, movement of people. And if you don't have that movement of people, it just falls apart completely.
yeah.
So,
One other thing.
yes.
This might be a long-term change. I mean, I think this is a historical event, and its effects will probably be present throughout our lifetimes. Currently, like, companies are starting to realize the fact that not everyone actually has to go to work. I mean, most jobs, like manufacturing, transport jobs, like the most basic jobs, all of those are obviously like, well, actually, no, transportation jobs, you're just driving a car. But a lot of jobs are basically,
You could work from home.
no one's going to the. Yeah, exactly. So, it may change how people work.
Yeah, speaking of
Just saying.
lifestyle changes, I was actually surprised by the amount of people who were saying like, oh, we weren't washing hands like this before the coronavirus, but now we are. It disturbs me that the amount of people that haven't been washing their hands properly even before the coronavirus began.
Yeah, I think proper hygiene is quite important in general, not just
So you know
when
how
there's a global
one of the
pandemic.
recent Google Doodles was about Igor Semmelweis. So interesting
What is
story
that?
about him. Oh yeah, so back in the days, right? He was the first one to like promote hand washing. He was like,
Yeah.
I think that we have these tiny invisible organisms on our hands, and I believe that by washing hands properly before we perform operations and surgeries, we could increase the chances of them actually surviving and not getting infected. Guess what happened to him?
What
He
happened?
got put into an insane asylum.
Wow.
Because apparently people thought he was crazy for seeing tiny little things on his hands that could cause disease. Anyways, yeah, but you know, it's kind of scary that a lot of people weren't washing their hands properly until the entire coronavirus thing.
Yeah.
Kind of disturbing if you think about it. So maybe that's
is.
a good lifestyle change, that people are actually, starting to wash their hands, or at least paying attention to how they wash hands and maybe improving on some methods.
Do you want to talk about how the healthcare system factors into this?
That is very true. So I'm pretty sure people already heard story of this, but about coronavirus testing in the United States, how it's not accessible to everyone.
Oh yeah, it's fair. Yeah, that's been talked about a lot. If you're rich, it's very easy to get a test, but
I think
not
it's
so much if you're middle class.
I think it's like at times of crisis like these where we really see the divide between the upper class and the lower class. I was reading this really interesting article from the American Geographic Society about how online learning in America and how there's this digital divide in America where a large portion of the population doesn't have access to broadband internet, and therefore they don't have like as high quality of online learning in their respective educational districts. So I think at least a crisis like these, it really shows the difference between upper class and lower class. And upper class people, when their jobs are like cut off, it doesn't affect them as much. So.
And that's why we need the freedom dividend. Andrew Yang's policy coming up clutch.
Yeah, maybe
Donald Trump using his policy. This is huge.
Maybe like this will have a greater societal change and maybe encourage more involvement in politics. Like before this, there's already a lot of distrust in the government, like globally.
Yeah.
And I don't think coronavirus is going to help with this. I think there's going to be even more riots after this is over. It's just a me thing. Like the geopolitical impacts of the coronavirus is profound, much more than its actual health impact.
Well, it is up to government to stop pandemics. The private sector cannot do that, so we have to put our faith in government to solve the problems. And if they can't do that, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah,
people would be angry at government.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people right now who are not trusting the government. And anyway, so that's the kind of political and societal impact. I think it's now time we actually talk about the health impact.
Well, politically, like policy-wise, countries with the U.S., they didn't have paid sick leave until they introduced it, like with the current package that they're making right now. So that's a big factor, because if you don't have paid sick leave and you live paycheck to paycheck, it's kind of tough. You kind of have to go to work if you want to survive, and then in that case you're endangering people if you in fact have some sort of virus. Like if you're sick, it's a debate. Do you want to go to work? And you kind of have to go to work. Your livelihood depends on it. So that's why paid sick leave is important. Medicare for all. That's a whole nother topic.
Who knows? Maybe after this crisis is over, there might be some more progressive policies in the U.S., but that is probably very unlikely. But who knows? You never know. Like events like these, pandemics, they have a huge impact on society.
That is absolutely true. But you see with Italy, though, I think Joe Biden pointed this out in the debate with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Italy has Medicare for all, and clearly that hasn't stopped the problem. It's more, we've all heard it, right? Flattening the curve. Like people, I don't know this for sure. This is just what I've heard, but I hear people in Italy. Well, first of all, they're much older than us. That's indefinitely true.
If you look at the population pyramid, it's a lot more older people.
And I think Italian culture as well is just more handsy, I guess. I don't know. I can't speak on that directly.
Here's the thing, though. On general, actually, 90% of the time, European cities are far more dense than American cities, simply because American cities are much newer and are built around cars. So European cities, relatively speaking, are much more compact, and I think it's easier for a virus to spread in these conditions.
Let's talk about density. If we look at the U.S. right now, New York City is like almost quadruple times any other city or any other. New York State has like 25,000 other cases. The next one is like Washington or California with like 2,000 or 3,000. I don't know. But yeah, New York City, one of the most densely populated cities in the world. So actually, what you're saying about density?
New York City isn't even that densely populated, relatively speaking. Let me search up the most dense cities in the world.
I think it's Tokyo, right? Most dense.
No, it should be European cities. I watched the Windover production video about it. Oh, it's Manila. Manila in the Philippines. Yeah, so comparatively speaking, like I think so New York, like for some reason I don't know why a lot of people think New York City like is super dense. But in reality, they're not really that dense, in terms of like population density wise. Just because the way they're built, a lot of European cities are more dense.
I see.
But But yeah, so again, Italian cities probably more dense, probably easier to spread. Doesn't help that
Yeah.
Italy has a lot more old people, and again, with the movement of people, Italy, it's kind of in the center. I say kind of, and as such, there's probably a lot of movement of different people around. So that could be another reason why the virus kind of just exploded in Italy.
Well, we've talked a lot on the macro scale. Maybe we should move to the micro. Do you want to talk about how this affects life at St. Andrews?
Life at St. Andrews. Yeah, well, we have online classes now. We have the Global Protect VPN, and we have Zoom.
I'm really excited to see how this goes. Like, I don't know how it's gonna end up.
I should get a soundboard.
I feel like I'm just gonna be really unproductive.
Well, this could be interesting because normally in a class there are really annoying kids. Now the teachers could be really annoying kids.
That's true.
Who knows? Maybe.
Yeah. How about the cadet inspection? What do you like?
You wear a scarlet and you just.
I really don't think the school year is gonna continue. Do you think the school year is? Do you think we're gonna get to go back to school?
Probably not. Honestly.
Probably not.
Well,
and
okay, here's. I don't know. Like.
Well, the Ontario, they moved the date. Like, you know how public schools, they pushed it 2 weeks back. They moved that even further. And we haven't reached the peak yet of cases, cases per day.
But that's if we the better we can flatten the curve, the faster we get to return. So nobody knows. It could last for a while. It could.
Well, that's not even true. Well, if we flatten the curve, it's gonna last a longer period of time. Like, there's gonna be less cases per day. But like,
true.
Yeah.
Well, you're not wrong, but I think that if we flatten the curve, it'll help us get back into.
Well, flattening the curve obviously is the goal, and that's what we should do. But I don't think there's gonna be a return to normalcy until summer.
Until a vaccine is developed. Which will probably
obviously
take
that.
A few more months, possibly even more. I know in the Saskatchewan they've already started testing.
Yeah, you've heard of the summer, the viruses in the summer, they tend to go away during that time, but after the summer, there's a potential for a second wave to occur.
Yeah, when people are not careful. Let's check how long the Spanish flu lasted.
Well, the coronavirus in magnitude.
1920.
Jeez. Well, in magnitude, the Spanish flu is still much bigger than the coronavirus, right?
Yeah. I suppose.
Well, I'm not sure how hygiene standards were back then, but I'm sure they're going to still do today.
It also doesn't help that, most of the people just came back from a long war.
Mm-hmm.
Where they were living in super dirty trenches. And it also doesn't help that both the Allies and the Axis censored early reports of the illness in fear that it destroys morale.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, the reason it's called the Spanish flu is since the countries who were at war censored it, it was only reported in Spain because it was neutral. So that's why it's called the Spanish flu. Even though it didn't start in Spain, it did not start in Spain, nor it is from Spain. It's just called the Spanish flu because it was reported there.
Where was it from?
We don't know. It could either be from the United Kingdom, the US, or possibly even China. But what we do know is that it's a reassortment of the H1N1 virus.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of China, Donald Trump's comments calling it the Chinese virus. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's a little bit, I don't want to say racist, but I think it's a little bit discriminatory. Like, we get it, it's from China, but this is an issue that...
the point he's trying to make is that it is from China, and
True.
I understand what he's saying. It is the Chinese, I do believe it is the fault of the Chinese government that we're in this situation.
Well...
They repressed reporters from reporting on, you've heard the stories, right?
Yeah.
They didn't allow the doctors to report and tell other people about the stories. They called them crazy and The
sounds
Chinese
rather
communist
familiar.
regime has done this.
Sounds rather familiar to the
That did
Spanish
perpetuate
flu.
the spread of the disease.
Yeah.
So I do think it is the fault of the Chinese government, but calling it the Chinese virus has a different
it
connotation
does,
than
yeah.
the government of China. That's referring to a whole host of people.
Yeah.
And I've seen plenty of videos of discrimination, and like it's even happened to my
So many
parents. They went to go
memes.
out and buy some
Yeah.
fish, and like
Don't cough.
it's very
Anyways,
very unfortunate.
I actually have some graphs, and yeah, it's true what you said. Like it goes back down, but then it rises back up again because of the second wave thing. So yeah, that does happen. The pandemic mostly killed young adults in 1918 to 1919. 99% of pandemic influenza deaths in the U.S. occurred in people under 65. The coronavirus is kind of the opposite of this. It
Yeah.
kills old adults. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Well, part of what makes the coronavirus kind of really bad is it makes you vulnerable to other viruses and diseases because it kind of suppresses your immune system.
Right. So, questions generally about the virus. It seems like if you were one of the first people to contract the virus,
That would suck.
and you recovered from it though.
You have a chance to get it again, don't you?
Can you? You have the antibodies within yourself. Like your immune system
Yeah,
has
but
the
I'm pretty
antibodies.
sure there was like this news report where they're like, oh no, you could get it again. I'll have to fact check this. I'll fact check it right now. I'm glad that the World Health Organization came up with it, the actual name for it.
Yeah,
COVID-19.
COVID-19. Well, it's kind of like a HIV and AIDS situation.
Yeah, I suppose.
The actual virus is called SARS-CoV-2, right? But like the condition that you get is called COVID-19. I believe that's.
Oh, it does
the
have
correct
something
terminology.
similar to the Spanish flu in that it causes this thing called a cytokine storm. But
Sounds like an attribute in Plague Inc.
that is true. Well, Plague Inc. is I don't know.
Plague Inc. Total organ.
Also, we've studied the S curve in APGO, and this is starting to look like an S curve.
Oh.
Anyways. It is unknown if past infections provide effective and long-term immunity from people who recover from the disease. But cases in which recovery from COVID-19 has been followed by positive tests for coronavirus at a later date has been reported. It is unclear whether these cases are the result of reinfection, relapse, or testing error. So we don't know. We don't know. And also, this causes long-term lung damage, possibly.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So that's also one of the reasons why you don't want to get it.
I think something else to talk about is the spread of misinformation in this kind of time. I mean, despite how terrible this virus has been, there are still people that try to take advantage of you. Like,
oh yeah, that happens all the time. Like the amount of people selling gas masks. Sorry, not gas masks, like surgical masks.
Well, unless you're getting an N95 respirator, that's not going to do
I actually did
anything
some
for you.
research on the N95 respirator and why it's called the N95. I'm a nerd. I like things like that. Apparently, it's for like dust things, and the N means it's not resistant to oil. For some reason, it's a United States thing, and they're like, oh yeah, our system just talks about protection to oil, and it's just N, R, and P. R is resistant and P is proof, but it just, for some reason, all centers around oil.
Well, have you heard of the report that said that you shouldn't take Advil
No,
if you have the coronavirus?
I never read that.
That was a report, and my mom first told me about that,
Oh,
and that sounded suspicious.
That
And
does,
turns out
yeah.
it's not true. It is fake news.
oh
Well,
wow,
It's been anecdotally given, but there is no study that says that this is true.
Did you also
So-
hear about the news that Americans are like buying ammo like crazy?
Ammo.
Yeah, they're like, oh,
Are
the
you gonna
apocalypse
shoot
is
the
coming.
coronavirus?
The apocalypse is coming.
What?
And also they
There's
want to
also a
shoot the
huge
coronavirus.
divi-
Yeah.
there's also a huge divide between, in America, in the United States, there's a divide between Republicans and Democrats
I don't get why there's
in
such
terms of
big of a divide.
how much they fear the coronavirus. Democrats, they fear it much more. Republicans, not so much.
Nah,
At least that's what I've seen, which
I
is
don't know.
interesting.
that is interesting. That's
But I think
usually
everyone
the other
should
way
be-
around when it comes to different things.
Yeah, I think people should be
Very
Careful.
concerned, very, very,
yes,
very careful.
very concerned.
Because like even if you're like, oh yeah, my immune system is fight it off, it's still you don't want to go through the experience because
Yeah, you don't.
it's really tough on your lungs and it could cause long-term lung damage. You don't want to go through it. So
Yeah.
apparently you have to use the N95 because it protects the wearer from the inhalation of infectious particles.
Yeah. Well, if you have facial hair, like long facial hair, that will actually negate the mask because the whole point of the mask is to seal off your entire face
That's interesting.
from outside particles. So if you have too long of a facial hair,
And
yeah,
the infection, like I guess, yeah, it attacks your respiratory system first, so it's good to have your face covered. That's all I'm saying.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, what other interesting things we could talk about?
We could talk about the efforts to stop the virus. Do you think that's
Yeah.
interesting?
Here's the thing though, for some reason, well, I guess I'm not surprised, but a lot of countries in Africa don't have cases of coronavirus.
Well, not many people are going there.
Exactly, and that just shows like, you know, how much mobility and travel and infrastructure comes into play when talking about the spread of diseases.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, I think there used to be a report in SARS. People were like, let's match cases of SARS with airlines, and they found that if you had a direct flight from Hong Kong to your city, you're 20 times more likely to have a case of SARS there.
Wow.
So air travel, it's massive in terms of like contributing to the spread. And I think when the crisis is over, a lot of airline companies are gonna die.
That's tough.
Like it's already tough for airline companies because of the how do you call it? The war, it's the oil price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia.
Well, I mean, that's actually benefited them because then they can buy jet fuel for cheaper prices. I mean, obviously, this is terrible and they're not
Yeah, but
gaining
when you're
profits at this
fighting
point.
a war, the prices are volatile, and plane
Yeah.
companies don't like volatility.
That's true.
Like, yeah, it's good short term, but what people would do in the short term is that they would buy tons of surplus oil, and then
That's what the U.S. government is doing.
yeah, but then once it's over, you have all this oil just kind of sitting around. You could use it for yourself, but the cost of actually maintaining those oil and keeping it around, airline companies just dislike volatility. They do not like volatile prices. I'll just say that. And most airline companies, they're probably gonna go bankrupt because they need their revenue stream, and if they don't have it, the cost of
Well,
like
it's likely
maintaining
it's likely the
everything-
government will bail them out.
well, hopefully, because a lot of airlines already went out of business. Remember Thomas Cook,
Yeah, I
Monarch?
remember that.
Like, I don't think the airline industry could take another hit like this.
The first big hit, I think, was 9/11, right? That was.
No,
big
it
in
was
terms
the
of air travel.
I think during the 1980s,
Well,
the oil.
There was like a huge oil war. I
Yeah,
remember,
the oil,
I know
yeah,
that.
and then that was the first big hit, and then 9/11, and then
Did
the
you see
Gulf
the-
War.
Uh-huh.
Basically, anything that increases oil prices or affect oil prices affects the airline industry.
Yeah.
And then recently, when the Great Depression happened and the oil prices went back down, airlines started expanding like a lot. So like Ryanair, like low cost budget airlines started appearing, like Ryanair, WoW Airlines, and a Spirit. But now that the oil prices are going back up, WoW doesn't exist anymore. And Spirit is, has to cut even more costs. And they even considered like standing airplanes. So I don't think most low budget airlines could survive another hit like this. I think when this crisis ends,
businesses in general are just taking a massive hit.
But I think it's going to be especially hard on those airlines.
Yeah, that is true.
Which is sad. I like planes.
How, government, it is the government's job to basically bail everyone out in this situation, and they're taking up massive loans too. I think this is a responsibility of government. I mean, it's debatable, I guess.
Depends on what economic system you prescribe to.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the British Chancellor already approved some funding plans.
How are they gonna pay for all this? It's gonna be a lot of money.
Yeah, they're probably gonna have to raise some taxes.
I mean, I think this is like one of the greatest government intervention plans.
Did you know that the UK government considered printing more money as a solution? And then all the economists are like, no, you idiot. Don't do it. What are you, stupid?
Yeah, one of the worst ideas ever.
I guess it could
never do that.
There's like a 5% chance of it actually working.
How would it work?
Well, you need to actually put value behind the currency and then print more. So it.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen when you just print more money.
It does not. But they could try.
Probably not a good idea.
Probably not a good idea. Anyway, speaking of the Brits, actually no, just in general, the 2020 Olympics has been cancelled.
I thought it got postponed.
It did?
Cancelled or postponed?
Let me check.
I don't know.
Quickly.
Postponed to the next year, I think. I don't know.
Let me check.
Yeah, it says it's postponed.
Well, that's my bad. Also, Tom Hanks got infected.
Yeah, a lot of celebrities, unfortunately, have been
it's kind of scary, though.
Infected.
Coronavirus spreading in New York like a bullet train. As New York's governor predicts thousands of deaths, President Trump hopes to reopen the U.S. by Easter.
That is insane. That. I feel like that's just way too early. That is definitely way too early. Every single health expert disagrees with him. Yeah, but Anthony Fauci is just can't take this anymore.
Oh, do you know what I'm also concerned by? Or not concerned. I'm kind of surprised. It's just that the amount of people buying stuff.
Oh, that is really bad.
Like they're fighting over stuff. It's like calm down, mate.
Necessary.
Calm down.
The supply chains are intact. And the government makes sure.
Not necessarily.
For the most basic of necessities.
Yeah, that's true. People don't notice, but infrastructure and logistics, a lot of people think it's one of the most boring things in the world.
Infrastructure is the most important thing. It's
but people think it's boring. But I love infrastructure. But one of the first things the governments do is to ensure that supply chains are intact, essentially. It's one of the first things they do. Second thing they do is then actually containing the virus.
Yeah. So
the supply chains are intact. The only reason there ever be a shortage is if people are buying too much things. It's I'm pretty sure there was an event in the 2000s where there was a hoax about how there's gonna be a toilet paper shortage, and then people went out and buy toilet paper, and then it turned into an actual toilet paper shortage. So it's not a shortage until people actually treat it like a shortage, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Because we learned about supply and demand, and if the demand doesn't change, the supply is going to be there. But if the demand suddenly increases and the supply doesn't increase with it, there's going to be a shortage. So
economics 101.
Yeah, so there's going to be a shortage in quotations, not because there's not supply, but because the demand just simply rose too much for the supply to keep up. Which I think people should think of that when they go out and buy stuff. Like, there's no shortage. Calm down. There's only shortage because demand is high.
Why did people suddenly decide that there was? Why did people start thinking there was going to be a toilet paper shortage?
I don't know. Someone's like, oh yeah, you need to have toilet paper. The U.S. government's gonna ban toilet paper. I don't know. It was a hoax. Okay, I don't know.
Apparently, it's only a problem in like Western. I don't know, America.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's like in other countries. I've heard this. They just instead of they don't even use toilet paper. They just use the spraying water. You know.
Advanced toilets.
That is, especially in Japan. I think even Europe they have a lot of that. So there's no toilet paper spray there.
Oh yeah, I guess another thing
no
that
one
kind
uses
of
toilet paper.
another thing that kind of pisses me. Well, I wouldn't say pisses me off. It's like one of those things that's like kind of annoys me a little bit. SAC toilets use American standard, and they're like 1 gallon per flush, and that is a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit excessive.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. Like,
yeah,
every time you flush the toilet, there's like water spraying up. Like
yeah, because the American standard is 1 gallon, but we don't need 1 gallon of water to flush the toilet.
Yeah, it's way too much. You gotta like sprint out of the stall before, like, if you don't want to get sprayed, you gotta.
Yeah, like in Sifton, in the second floor, the leftmost toilet. Every time you flush it flushes for like 5 seconds straight. Anyway, that's just like a little, like, it kind of annoys me a little bit that SAC has American standard toilets. That's me right there. I pay attention to toilets.
Toilets.
Important hygiene infrastructure.
Yep.
Are you ready for your online classes tomorrow?
It
have
will
AP
be
Geo
very
first
exciting,
period.
I think.
I have AP Geo first period.
Oh, nice. Well, I have AP Chem. I wonder. Oh, we should talk about APs.
Oh yeah, there's no multiple choice on AP exams this year.
That is, it's 45 minutes, short answer, online test.
How about the SATs? What do you know about the
SATs are canceled. They're all canceled. Well,
Really?
At least the ones like there was one in March. Obviously, that's canceled.
Yeah, that's canceled.
I was gonna take the one in May. They also canceled that.
Yeah.
So the next one is in June. They haven't
I'm
canceled
taking
that
that
yet.
I don't know. I'm taking it though. I signed up for it.
They're probably gonna cancel it.
Yeah, probably.
I mean,
The testing infrastructure has collapsed.
But it's not as big of a deal for SAT because you can always take it.
Yeah.
Like if you're in grade 11 right now, and let's say that they did cancel AP exams, you would have no APs to submit because like you're applying. If you're doing early action, you're gonna be applying early fall or like somewhere in the fall area, so you're not gonna have any APs. So I'm glad they saved the APs. They did not save the IBs. They canceled all IB exams. So
Interesting. Well, IB is like much
actually
more
really
like global, I suppose. It's also interesting.
AP is mainly for American, but if you're a grade 12 IB student, and you like, what happens?
Yeah, I guess you're screwed.
They cancel all your exams. Can you even?
I know that in some universities they're like, oh yeah, congratulations, you graduated. In some universities it's like that. I don't know. Man, I seriously want this.
What is the graduate of the scenario of the coronavirus situation doesn't get better? Are we gonna do an online graduation ceremony?
Can you imagine? That'd be cool. Well, no, it wouldn't be cool, but
that would be weird.
yes, all the teachers are starting to post their Zoom class links.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool though.
It's turbulent and
Very
interesting
turbulent
times we're in.
All right, stay safe, gentlemen. This has been the SAC.
Hands.
This has been the SAC podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Please wash your hands.